together and connects us. I'm actually sitting in the building that's behind me, the lovely Johnson Hall here on the University of Guelph's Guelph campus. And this campus is located within the Between the Lakes Treaty of 1792, the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this land continues to be home to diverse communities of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. And by acknowledging the land, we reaffirm our commitment to decolonization and reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action, and our collective responsibility to the land on which we work and learn.
And I'll jump in and introduce myself. So I'm Dianne Tyers. I'm the Assistant Vice President of the School of Continuing Studies, and I've been with the University of Guelph for coming up on about 10 months, I think, at this point.
My name is Carolyn Creighton, and I am the Director of Operations and People for the School of Continuing Studies, and I've been with the unit for about 5 years.
My name's
I think you muted Mariel there, Leanne.
Oh, sorry. My name is Mariel Mading. I am the Manager of Professional and Workforce Learning and Innovation, and I have been at the University of Guelph for 3 years. And turning it over to Leanne.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. So just to do a brief introduction for those of you who aren't familiar with the School of Continuing Studies, you may be familiar with us as our previous name, Open Learning and Educational Support, or Open Ed at the University of Guelph. But we're really working hard to ensure that we're providing flexible, accessible learning built for any type of learner. Our programs are crafted to meet learners where they are, empowering you to take the next step, whether it's advancing your career, exploring a passion, or building a new skill for the future. So if you've enjoyed any of our programming before, or you're looking for programming in the future, whether it's for yourself, if you're an employer who's looking for training for your employees, we have a great suite of programs that we offer for any type of learner, kind of at any stage in their career. And then just to quickly go over our agenda for today, first Diane's going to talk a little bit about the evolving world of work. Then we're going to pass it over to Carolyn, who's going to talk all about micro-credentials and how you can kind of look at micro-credentials in a different way, whether you're a learner or someone who is hiring, looking to fill skills gaps. Then Mariel's going to talk a little bit about competency-based learning and competency-based hiring. And then we'll briefly chat about some opportunities for co-designing custom programming with the School of Continuing Studies. And then we'll ensure that we have room for Q&A at the end. If you have any questions throughout this session at all, please feel to put them in the chat. We just ask that you keep your microphone on mute while the presenters are speaking, and we'll be monitoring the chat for any questions. And I'll pass it over to Dianne.
Great, thanks. So we're going to take a look at what we're calling the rapidly evolving world of work. So we're just going to look at some kind of macro trends and then micro trends and see how these are affecting how individuals and organizations continue to upskill and keep current in terms of what the workplace needs. So next slide. So one of the big things, and none of these are any surprises, but it's really good just to pull all the trends together. So we've got a lot of geopolitical and economic changes going on that are affecting the world of work. So, you know, the big one that's hitting the news all the time are the tariffs, trade agreements, political relationships between countries and trading partners, changes in regulatory bodies and standards around sustainability, around just a lot of different things that affect how companies can operate. We've got war and conflict, which is creating an unstable geopolitical and economic environment. And then just the economy, the regular ups and downs of an economy is also going on. So a lot of very large geopolitical and economic trends are directly affecting our workplaces. Next slide. Another set of trends, this is a really interesting one. We're at a point where we've got some generational changes happening in our workplaces. where our baby boomers, which for many, many years dominated the workplace, they are now actually they're the fourth largest generation in our workplaces now. So millennials are officially the largest group in the workplace now, followed by Generation Gen X, Gen Z, and then baby boomers. So this has created a couple of things. First of all, we've got multiple generations represented in our workplaces now. And then we've had this shift of sort of control of a workplace from the baby boomers over to the millennials. And this we see this in terms of expectations of careers, expectations of work-life balance. All of these things change as this generational dominance of the workplace changes. Next slide. And this one is no surprise. We've got a lot of technology change going on, which is really, really pushing change in our workplaces and in our workforces. Artificial intelligence is the big one, but we've got robotics going on, quantum computing, blockchain, and then who knows what the next technological changes will be coming down the pipeline. But technology is one of the most powerful driving forces of change in our workplaces today. Then we've also got some interesting things happening. All of our companies and organizations, everyone serves customers and consumers, and we've got a lot of preference changes happening there, which also impacts how our organizations and our workplace have to function. So we've got expectations now of rapid service, so rapid speed of service, expectations around personalization. It doesn't matter what you're purchasing or using. We have very much an expectation that what we purchase will be very personalized to what we need. Expectations around quality, expectations around sustainability, looking at a product in terms of how it's made or a service in terms of how it's offered and how much sustainability is built in. And then also accessibility. How accessible is it to a wide range of individuals with different needs and capabilities. So a lot of consumer preference changes are also impacting how our workplaces and our workforces operate. And what happens is all of these macro changes kind of all interact. So our general changes in the sector, regional changes, they all interact, and then they create a unique set of changes in each organization. So as you're looking at your own organization, look at all of these larger changes and then identify how are they interacting to create a unique set of changes or trends within your specific workplace. So if you compare one workplace to another, there will be some similarities, but there will also be some differences because these changes interact a little bit differently within each workplace. So each workplace kind of has a unique set of changes that they're dealing with and that they're being impacted by. So some of the things, one of the things that all of these rapid changes are bringing to the forefront in organizations is a real shift in terms of how businesses are identifying what their business challenges are. And I've just got a few slides from the latest report from the World Economic Forum. They issue an annual report. Just to preface, this is a report that was generated prior to the impacts of some of the geopolitical events that are impacting us now. But so these may change a little bit when the 2026 report comes out. But when businesses are asked, the World Economic Forum surveyed over 1,000 businesses globally, large and small, and asked them to identify what's the main gap that's a barrier to you growing your business. And the biggest one is skill gaps in the labor market. And this should be no surprise because all of these changes that I mentioned before, these all impact the skills and competencies that employees need in the workplace. The technology in particular, you need a very different set of skills when your organization is impacted by new technologies. And also the other changes also, they really impact what skill sets our employees need to bring to the workplace. Next slide. And so this barrier of skills that our employees need to business growth also creates talent management changes. So people tasked with managing people really have to look at it from a different perspective. And the biggest challenge and the biggest priority when it comes to managing people in an organization today is upskilling the workforce. And that is just making sure that employees have the skills they need to do the jobs they have today, and also prepping them for the jobs of tomorrow. So managing talent and making sure employees have the skills and capabilities they need to do their jobs is a huge, huge challenge in just about every organization today because of all of these changes that are happening. Next one. So the World Economic Forum also highlighted some of the core skills that have kind of bubbled to the surface as all of these changes have worked their way through different organizations. And so they've got a really good classification system around different types of skill sets. So they've got a cognitive skills bucket, a self-efficacy skills bucket, a working with others skills bucket, management skills, technology skills, and engagement skills. And then within those, they've identified some sub-skill sets. And once again, this is coming from a survey of over 1,000 companies globally. So right top of the list of the core skills that are needed by employees: analytical thinking, resilience, flexibility, agility. Those should be no surprise given the rapid changes that are happening in our organizations. Leadership and social influence, creative thinking. The rapid change creates a lot of rapid problem solving that's required, innovation that's required, and that's where that creative thinking comes in. Motivation and self-awareness, that's a self-efficacy skill set. Technology literacy, that's a huge one. AI is the big one right here, is AI literacy and AI competency. Some really interesting people skills around empathy and active listening. Another self-efficacy one is curiosity and lifelong learning, talent management, and then a service orientation and customer service. So these are the top skills that have kind of bubbled to the surface as all of the recent changes in our workforces have come into play. Next slide. So what does this mean when it comes to the learning that our employees need and want in order to be successful at their jobs and also to build successful careers for themselves? When we didn't have this kind of rapid change in our workplaces, the maintaining and building new skill sets was not an urgent piece for employees and for companies, but it is urgent today. And so this has created a change in the types of learning experiences that we offer and the types of credentials that we can offer. So both employees and employers are looking for shorter learning experiences because they don't have lengthy amounts of time to invest in learning brand new skill sets. They're looking for multiple delivery modalities. So some people like to learn online, some people like to learn in person. It's that whole personalization piece. They're looking for scheduling flexibility. So fit your learning into your life rather than taking time off work or interrupting your career to do a larger chunk of learning. People are also looking for a lot of different credentialing options. So it's not just a degree anymore. There's all kinds of certificates, diplomas, and micro-credentials, which we'll talk about. And each one of these types of credentials kind of serves a different purpose. So learners and organizations are really looking for a wide range of credentialing options. And then people are also looking for stacking options. So whenever you're learning, and if you have to do another piece of learning, you don't want to have to go back to the beginning. So employers and employees are really looking for, here's part one, and then I can stack it to make a certificate, I can stack it to make a diploma, I can stack it to make a degree. So the creating these learning pathways is really, really important in the learning space today. So all of the changes that we've seen in the workplace have resulted in changing requirements and changing needs and expectations when it comes to the skill learning and the competency learning that employees and employers want. And so we see this in terms of the learning and credentialing that can be offered today. So I'm going to turn it over to Carolyn, who's specifically going to talk about one type of credential, which is really flexible and really does meet the needs of employees and employers in this changing workplace and workforce context.
Thanks, Dianne. Yeah, so I'm going to be chatting about micro-credentials and their ability to facilitate short and accessible and practical learning experiences for our students. So before I get into what I have on to talk about, I wanted to get a sense of how familiar you are with the term micro-credentials. So Leanne has just popped up a quick poll, and we will see what answers come in. See the responses starting to slow down. All right, I think. Oh. Okay, so I'm hoping you can now see the results on your screen. So interesting, we have almost a perfect curve here. Scientist in me is really enjoying this. We have almost a perfect curve. Most people are somewhat familiar, have a general idea. We have a few people who are very familiar, a few people who've never heard of it. And this kind of aligns with, kind of where I've been focusing my slides for today is lots of different levels of experience, but generally we have some familiarity with the terminology. All right. So we asked a similar question to some of our colleagues at a recent teaching and learning conference here at the University of Guelph and asked them what comes to mind when you think of the word micro-credential. And this was just a word cloud that our question generated using Mentimeter. And we see things like specific, skill building, short, concise. In a couple places here, we see just in time, competency-based, leading into some of the topics that Mariel will cover a little bit later today. But those are lots of really good words to describe micro-credentials. So how do we define micro-credentials here at the School of Continuing Studies? Micro-credentials are a tangible reward or credit for short, practical, competency-based learning experiences. What really is critical to micro-credentials is that they are created in collaboration with industry. So a common question we see is, well, what's the difference between a non-degree course versus a micro-credential? That micro-credential is really grounded in a need that has been demonstrated and brought forward by industry as an area that needs additional support and upskilling. The benefit to a micro-credential is it then also provides a very clear way for learners to confidently showcase their skills and competencies to potential employers in language that employers understand. And this is done through a digital badge, so the credential that goes along with it. We have a couple examples here. One of our co-branded badges with our Aero Food Institute here at the University of Guelph. And also our more recent registered veterinary technician micro-credentials. So it provides a very secure way for students to share what they've learned, how they demonstrated competency, and then share that information out with potential employers or anybody else they might want to. So Dianne talked a little bit about some of this, but micro-credentials can really use any delivery modality, whether this is online, fully self-directed opportunities, or it could be an in-person short course, something over a weekend or evenings. They really can take whatever form makes sense for the material that is being covered in the micro-credential. Micro-credentials can be standalone learning experiences, or they can be stacked into micro-certificates or certificates, looking at a bigger body of work to demonstrate more understanding. They can really supplement or complement existing academic learning. So maybe somebody has completed a degree and they're looking to slightly change their focus. They can have an opportunity to try something a little bit different through a micro-credential, see if it's the right space for them. But they're mostly used to fill competency gaps, upskill and reskill, and they use competency-based and evidence-based assessments. So it's really not about necessarily gaining knowledge. It's what you can do and what you can demonstrate. Your capabilities, those competencies are the really key piece to micro-credentials. So why are we talking today about micro-credentials? Why are they helpful for both applicants and existing employees, as well as employers? Well, on the applicant or employee side, they can allow learners to gain new skills and competencies quickly without that formalized degree or diploma going into a significant time commitment. Micro-credentials are often anywhere from 10 to 30 hours. That's what our standard tends to be here at the university. But they can be longer, but they really are that kind of short and sweet, get to the point, learn those key competencies, and then be able to demonstrate them. They're flexible, efficient, and cost-effective for learners. You're not committing to a full degree or diploma. They're that opportunity to try a new path before fully committing. And they also demonstrate a commitment to professional development. Finally, they demonstrate hands-on applied learning to future employers. As a director of operations and people, I do spend a certain amount of time in the hiring space looking at applicants coming in for positions. I certainly know from my own perspective that when I'm looking at multiple applicants, if I see that individuals have demonstrated that commitment to professional development in the space through micro-credentials or micro-certificates, it certainly does have a positive impact on their application. What about if you're on the employer side? Well, micro-credentials can help access a skilled workforce. Perhaps you're looking for demonstration of a specific competency. An individual coming in with a very specific micro-credential can help you identify who those individuals are. Access to micro-credentials can increase output and productivity for businesses, making them a really good option. And they can, from the resume side, provide credibility and clarity to an applicant's academic background, and that commitment to professional development. Micro-credentials can also support skills-based and competency-based hiring practices. And with that, I believe I'm passing it off to Mariel to chat a little bit more about that.
That's great. Thank you so much. So we've heard competency and skills a lot in this presentation so far. And so one of the reasons why these are so important is, as Dianne said, the ability to upskill and reskill and develop your abilities as we are facing such an emergent workforce with so many changes happening at the same time. So next slide, what is in fact competency? So when we're talking about competency is essentially a combination of knowledge, skills, and behaviors that are required to perform a certain role effectively and in a specific context. And eCampus provides a very specific definition on there. Competency-based learning emphasizes what learners are able to do, not just what they know. So rather than focusing solely on theoretical understanding, which often you get in very traditional academic pathways, this approach prioritizes that development and demonstration of practical, applicable skills in real-world contexts. So learners are able to show the progression and evidence of their ability to perform a task and apply knowledge effectively, etc., through a personalized and goal-oriented and measurable learning experience. So competencies, we often talk about them all the time, and we can organize them into different groups. So there's core competencies: communication, problem solving, collaboration. They're foundational and often relevant across many roles, industries, etc. You have leadership or more level-based competencies: coaching, strategic thinking, conflict resolution. They're often more aligned to a position, responsibilities with an organization, and they might have much more of a range in terms of complexity as people advance in their skill and career set. You also have technical or role-based competencies. These are very specific skills and knowledge required for a specific function, equipment operation, or data analysis, or financial modeling. These are very specific competencies. Developing a competency is, no matter what, a progressive journey. So depending upon where you're in your career, your familiarity, etc., you are going to go on that journey throughout your own expertise. And it can involve formal learning and real world application. And that's one thing that is important when we're talking about things like micro-credentials and competency-based learning, is that there is a real world application. And it's not static. Competencies evolve along with the response to new technologies, organizational needs, and societal shifts. So as the world changes, so must the skills and the abilities of learners. And ongoing and reflective practices are essential. So when we're talking about a competency framework, this is actually a foundation for talent development, which is critical for growing your workforce, either in your organization or on a larger industry level. And it's that shared language for learning performance and advancement across a various context. Moving on. So when we're actually talking about these learning experiences and we're designing with competencies in mind, what are we actually doing? How is this different than other learning experiences? Often traditional design of a learning experience might be, what do we want to cover? But competency-based learning focuses and asks a different question, and it's, what do learners need to be able to do? And this focuses on capability development and not necessarily just information dump. So for example, pretend you are talking and you need to grow project management, and you're talking about a training for that. A traditional course or one approach could be, we're going to identify topics of what is a Gantt chart and phases of a project lifecycle. Great. However, a competency-based approach is going to focus on the question, can this person lead a kickoff meeting and build a project plan with milestones and risks clearly communicated? That would probably also identify the phases of a project lifecycle, and those would be topics that would support that competency. So it's not just the outcome of that knowledge, it's supporting the kind of learning that closes those skills gaps and supports that performance on the larger and more holistic level. And that's exactly why micro-credentials are so aligned with competencies, is because they can validate this. So when we're designing learning outcomes, they're tied directly to those real-world competencies, focusing on the skills that people need to develop. Activities and assessments are crafted to measure actual performance, not just memory recall or participation. And they're focused often on more observable behavior and application in specific workforce or workplace settings. All right, thank you. Moving on to the next slide. All right, so we've talked about, well, competency-based learning, but competency-based hiring is also part of this larger conversation. And traditional hiring can often stop at qualifications. What degree do you have? How many years of experience do you have in X field? But that doesn't always guarantee the performance in your environment or what you're needing, and it doesn't necessarily focus on the skills that you might need in a specific context that you're facing right now. Competency-based hiring asks a different question. It asks, can a person demonstrate the specific skills and behaviors we need to succeed here? So when you're defining competencies well, you're not just hiring for a role, but you're hiring for the success in your culture, in your team, and in your larger strategy and business need. And all of those things come together. So this approach aligns your hiring with your current and future goals. You might be facing upcoming expansion or transformation, or just a lot of very high level of uncertainty as we're seeing right now. It's focusing on transferable skills and potential, not just what people have been able to deliver in past roles. And it makes often for a more inclusive and performance-driven hiring decisions. So ultimately, as you start to break down what your organizational goals are, launching new product, improving operations, you start asking, what do people need to do differently? And that's what competencies can reveal and why they're powerful for both hiring and developing your existing workforce. Next slide. Ultimately, we are all a part of a business. We are all working towards a larger goal. And so when we're talking about training in an organizational context, it's not just about training people. We're enabling performance. This is about business capability and helping people to do what the business actually demands, particularly in sectors and markets and organizations that are facing so much volatility, change, and need to adapt at such a quick level. So if we want to perform differently, we have to equip them differently. So competencies help kind of give us that larger map. They help to say, what do we need? What do we need to grow? And learning, that actual learning experience helps to get people through that practical application. It's helping to build that muscle that you're doing on a basis. And micro-credentials help to provide that mechanism. They help us, one, to signal and verify the actual capabilities that are important and required in organizations, in industry. And as we've already talked about, they're precise, practical, and shareable. When you also pair that with competency-based hiring, your talent pipeline aligns from who you're bringing in to how we grow them. And this helps learning to become more strategic and purposeful and tie directly back to your business needs. So as we're seeing hiring shifts and much greater focus on skills practice, we're placing, greater value on clear and verifiable evidence of a candidate's capabilities, especially in roles that are requiring up-to-date job-ready skills and consistently and high level of change and turnover. So micro-credentials can provide that clarity. They are designed to be aligned with the industry. They can be updated typically on a much faster lens, and we can adapt them to a very specific contexts. So when a candidate presents a micro-credential, it can signal more than just knowledge. It confirms that practical demonstrated ability through authentic assessment. And you can spot candidates who are proactive and ready to contribute to the larger business needs. Alrighty. So as we now looking forward, I want to just take a moment to pause. We've given so much to you. So before we talk about the final topic in our conversation today, and co-design training, would you please consider, and you can pop this into the chat or you can just quietly reflect to yourself, are you struggling to find candidates who are meeting the evolving skills demands in your industry? What critical skills are consistently missing, hard to assess in your hiring, onboarding, or upskilling efforts, or skills that are targeted? Micro-credentials could help to validate with clarity and confidence. Or frankly, are you at a point of deeper reflection in terms of how are the larger systems level changes that we are dealing with affecting your existing workforce? So we'll give you a few seconds to just think on that. I don't see anything in the chat. Nope. And yes, I see someone saying it's such a struggle. It is. We are facing a very trying time right now. All right, moving forward, I'm sure when we get into Q&A, there'll be opportunities. So the last point of today's conversation that we wanted to talk about is co-creating competency-based training. Do you mind just moving to the next slide, Carolyn? Thank you so much. So this is a space where we can be targeted, impactful, and customized. Moving forward. So when we're talking about co-creation of employee training micro-credentials, really the goal here is to actually empower your workforce with tailored training that are specific to your organization's needs and skills gaps. So how do we go about this? We often will do the problem and solution, but really the goal is that we want to work together in partnership to help you figure that out and align it back with your actual needs, because we do recognize that every organization is different, unique people, goals, challenges, and contexts. So we'll start with a conversation, understanding what it looks like in your environment, what skills matters most, and where you might be facing some of those gaps. And then what we can do is co-create those micro-credentials or whatever it is that you in fact do need to support your workforce, whether that's maybe frontline skills, leadership skills, or potentially role-specific expertise. And we do emphasize consistently in all of our design, competency-based learning. So again, keeping things in line with what's going on. And that's where we work very closely with industry. And I'm going to just take a quick example just to talk about something very practical that we've done recently. Moving on to the next slide, please, Carolyn. Thank you. So this is an example. We had a large organization approach us quite recently, and they didn't want an off-the-course shelf. They wanted something that was very specific to their context, and it was aligned with a very clear strategic need that they had, that they needed to build leadership and change capabilities across multiple layers of leadership to support major transformational initiatives that they were going through. So they had some clarity on the problem, but we worked with them to decide and co-create 3 micro-credentials for 3 targeted employee groups that they had identified: executive leaders, people managers, project delivery staff. And some of the topics are listed there: leading change, navigating resistance, risk management, data-informed decision-making, board governance and oversight. What we also did was we looked at the competency development across those levels, though. So for example, risk management, one of the goals was that they wanted to help risk management be a part of every level of leadership. So risk management for project delivery staff, that training looked very different than executive leader risk management training. But the goal was, again, starting to see that scaffolding of the competency development across the board. It was the same with change management. Depending upon where you were at, you were facing change in a different way and your responsibility was different, and how you approach that learning would be as well. Key features, we had sector-specific case studies and scenarios that complemented employees' learning, and we wanted them to very specifically apply it to their real-world scenario. We had tools embedded right into the course learning material, and we had worked with subject matter experts directly in that organization to help make sure that we were landing and getting the exact need that they wanted to be addressed within reason. And with that, ultimately we recognize that learning and talent development is always a challenge, but this is a really exciting part of an organization. And so whether you're an employee and you're looking at advancing your career or reskilling or upskilling, micro-credentials can provide a great way to start to get those industry specific or those very clear and nuanced skills that you want to apply. But if you're also facing specific challenges in your organization, let's talk about what's next. Carolyn, would you please move to the next slide? Thank you. So this is where, we definitely we love doing micro-credential development. We've got multiple projects on the go, and we've put some contact information up here for you to review. And with that, it is now time for the Q&A, and generally a huge thank you for all of you to join. And I'm starting to see comments in the chat, which I love. All right. All right. At this point in time, do you want to manage questions in the chat, Leanne, or can we open up to anyone?
Yeah, at this point, anyone can either pop a question in the chat if they have a specific challenge that they're having within their workforce. I know Jeannie mentioned something in here, and then Dianne responded to that as well. You're also welcome to just raise your hand or come off mute if you have a specific question for anybody as well.
While we're waiting for that, I'll just comment a bit more on Jeannie's, the competency that Jeannie identified. And this is a really interesting one. And this is why I like the model from the World Economic Forum, where they have that category of competency or skill around self-efficacy. And this is really, it's a tough competency to help people learn, but it's a really impactful one. And it's all of these skills around managing self. So managing your own motivation, managing your own engagement, developing your professionalism. And so that I love that model from the World Economic Forum, because it has that self-efficacy set of competencies that often they're the ones that were like, something's going on here, but I don't quite know what it is. And then that self-efficacy space is often where a lot of those challenges arise. Mariel, do you want to talk about that one? How often do you refresh your micro-credentials?
Yes, that is a great question. So within our general overall programming review, we do want to keep on top of really the quality of all of our programs and offerings on a consistent basis. So for example, our certificates go for review every 5 years. Micro-credentials, it often really does depend upon the actual micro-credential itself. So for example, we just worked on the industry and the specific role of registered veterinary technicians. And there's going to be a lot of change potentially in upcoming legislation. So we're planning on often a tighter review for those micro-credentials. It probably will be reviewed within 2 years. We just launched the first round. Others, we might take a slightly longer term, but ultimately, one thing we do have is avenues to continue and consistently connect back with our industry partners so that if they're seeing trends, if they're seeing changes, then we can start to assess and move that forward into review as much as possible, as early as possible. So as things evolve, that is our goal, is to actually evolve with them and anticipate wherever possible.
I think
Yeah.
that's the really crucial piece on the course feedback that we get from students, and asking questions that really ask, is the learning meeting their needs? And if we start to see shifts in those responses, that can be a really good sign that it's time to say what's working, what's not. Do we need to make some tweaks to make it an effective micro-credential again?
Yeah, and I'll just jump in with a comment there too, is that Mike, as Mariel mentioned, we've got a longer review process for our certificates, diplomas, and so on. Micro-credentials have a much shorter life cycle than lengthier credentials. That we can get them to market faster, so we can develop them faster. We review them more frequently, and often we'll sunset them or close them down more frequently. So sometimes a competency becomes very, very urgent, and then in 2 to 3 years, it's no longer urgent, so that micro-credential can be closed off. So yeah, micro-credentials have this much shorter and much faster life cycle, which makes them very powerful because they can respond to these emerging pieces that Mariel talked about. A lot of stuff emerges, and we have to get those competencies addressed really quickly. Yeah, Amina had a comment that clients face challenges around digital literacy. That's a huge one. And that actually can be unpacked into multiple competencies because there's a lot of different pieces. There's the actual do you know how to use something technically, and then do you know how to use it appropriately as a particular tool in your work context? Adaptability, that's another self-efficacy piece. Can you manage change? Are you adaptable? Are you flexible? That's a really hard one to deal with, and it's one of those ones that it's hard to put your finger on what's going on, but it's one of those self-efficacy pieces. And then emotional intelligence is another self-efficacy piece. Yeah. And yeah, this is the power of competency-based learning, because when you address them, you take those barriers away. And if you don't address them, these employees, they just get stuck in this cycle of the same lack of competencies just keeps hitting them over and over and over again, and they can't be successful. Yeah. Carolyn or Mariel, do you want to address Jeannie's question? Because this is a really good one.
I know I've been thinking about it since it came in. I think it's a great question. I think I like to describe some things as the science and the art. So there is I'll call the micro-credential the science. We can teach certain skills and competencies, and I certainly think there's a place for that. Sometimes if you're not taught a certain skill or provided with examples of it, you don't always learn it. So the micro-credential, can really help with some of those questions around what is emotional intelligence. How do you manage and have effective relationships in the workspace? What does it mean to act with professionalism? So I wouldn't necessarily say they're red flags, but I do think, I'm thinking also back into the competency-based hiring and the questions that you ask in your hiring interview that are very much scenario-based. How are people going to respond to certain prompts? Really trying to get a sense of how people, I'm thinking very customer service focused positions right now. How do people react and interact in those scenarios? It can be really powerful and help to address some of those issues as well. But there's also micro-credentials as a way of making sure everybody is speaking the same language in an organization.
I would also agree. It's the science and the art. And from the art background, I love these types of questions. I think to build on Carolyn, your comment, yes, these are all things that we can do in a micro-credential. I think we might have some of these already built into some of our micro-credentials already. These are really core skills and abilities and competencies that people need across all sectors, etc. But this is what I would also say is that if, you know, if a client was coming to say, these are the things that I'm seeing, these are the gaps, you know, we can develop the learning experience. But part of that conversation that I had earlier was, it's not just about here's the information, it's about how you actually practice it. So what on the back end can the employer help to make sure that these are like opportunities and practices can be engaged? So in the client that I just really briefly presented at the end, we have lots of modules for them on many competencies. But one thing that they have been doing that's really been successful, I think, on their end is taking what they're doing in the course and bringing it back into what they're doing as part of the larger work that they're doing. So they're bringing in certain components into team meetings. They've mapped it to their performance measures as part of their hiring and performance evaluations on a yearly basis. So there's ways to help, you know, talk about that from multiple lenses. So that micro-credential is that learning experience, which is so important and integral. And then partnered with opportunities to develop that, you have a great way for people to actually grow their emotional intelligence, managing relationships effectively and providing that opportunity to do so.
Yeah, I agree. And the connectivity amongst the three is really, really important to recognize. So to your question, Jeannie, like if you have competency-based hiring and your interview process highlights, okay, this candidate has these challenges or, you know, has these competency gaps, do you hire that candidate or not? There's a lot of factors that come into play. Like, do you have other candidate options? How urgent is it that you fill this position, or can you wait and try another hiring run? These are pieces that would factor into the decision. But if you do feel that, you know, if you need to make a hire, be very honest both with yourselves and with the candidate of the competency gaps, and then address them right away. So make it part of the onboarding process, for example, to have this particular set of competency-based training. If it's in the self-efficacy piece, for example, that can be part of your onboarding training. It can be part of a requirement that they complete this within their probationary period, so that you've got time to identify, okay, they've had this training, and you give them some time to try and implement the changes or practice the competencies, and then you can make a decision moving forward. So there's a few other contextual pieces that I think come into play, but you know, you can strategically choose to have this micro-credential or competency-based learning experience as part of your onboarding process to address things that come up in the interview process that you have concerns about. And then, you know, ultimately, we all want our employees to succeed. And so by addressing it right from the get-go with some type of learning experience based around competencies, you're setting that employee up for success right away. You're not saying, okay, we had this red flag when we were interviewing you, we're just going to hire you and see how you do. You're being very proactive and saying, we're going to give you this learning experience, so we will set you up for success right from day one. So that's just one possible way to approach that. Yeah. And that's the power of this type of learning experience. Yeah.
All right. Is there any other questions? We'll do a bit of a last call for questions, either popping off mute or throwing them in the chat. All right. If no other questions, I wanted to thank everyone for joining us today. You'll receive an email from us in the next few days with some information about the session, how you can connect with us, as well as a recording of the session. So we hope to connect with some of you in the future, and thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.